So we have now reached the last piece in my mini collection. This is L'Histoire de Babar, or The Petite Elephant, by Francis Poulenc. And you're probably familiar with this composer, but he was born in 1899 and he died in 1963. You may recall he's known for his simplicity. He often incorporated folk tunes and music from the cabaret in his works. His mature pieces, however, show a marked interest in religion, and his music is often ranked with fellow French composer Messiaen. Poulenc's music embraces the tonal and modal systems. Chromaticism, when used, is mostly in passing, and his pieces display his love for beautiful melodies and uncomplicated accompaniments. Some argue that he's the most distinguished composer since the death of Fauré, and Poulenc's intentions to study at the Paris Conservatory, like our other composers we mentioned earlier, were sadly cut short by the early death of his parents. However, he was a pupil of the pianist Ricardo Vignes and was also a member of Les Six, along with Mio earlier. The composer's oeuvre consists of works for chamber music, orchestral music, solo voice, piano music, and dramatic works for the stage. All right, so we're going to dive right into this piece. The story of Babar originates from a French children's book of the same title from the author Jean de Bruenhoff in 1931. So I absolutely love the backstory of this musical piece. The plot centers on the little elephant, Babar, who is orphaned after his mother is killed by a hunter. So it's rather a dark start to this book by Jean de Bruenhoff. To avoid capture, the baby elephant runs away through the forest until he reaches a town. There he meets a rich old lady who takes him under her wing and eases him in to human society by buying him fancy clothes and teaching him manners. The story ends by returning to his elephant friends and family, and he gets married and becomes the king of the elephants. So it has a very positive ending after a rather dark start there. Note that this piece actually is an excerpt from much longer work of the same title for narrator and piano by Poulenc, and the text, of course, comes from the book. In its original state, the complete piano solo and narration is 31 pages long, and it's about 22 minutes when performed. The chosen musical excerpt of our discussion is a stylized waltz that breaks into the story after the old lady befriends Babar and gives him money to buy clothes, to which he replies, "Thank you, madame." So Poulenc sets this piece in A-flat major, so there's a very strong tonic chord present in the first and the final measures of this piece. Each section ends on the tonic or dominant seventh chord. The waltz bass is prevalent throughout this piece, very recognizable. The composition features a returning theme that is contrasted by new material. The theme returns twice with alterations in the supporting accompaniment, and then you can see on the outline below, we have the A section, first 6 measures, and then the B section starting at measure 7. The A prime returns at measure 11, C section at measure 15, and then we finally conclude with that last reiteration of the A section. We're going to pause here and take a listen to this wonderful piece. Well, as we heard, this work borrows from the Romantic era character piece, in which a short instrumental solo is intended to convey a story, a mood. There's no way to get away from that in this piece, and I, in fact, embrace it. I love it. Poulenc enhances this experience with that actual story being narrated and intertwined with the music. So it'd be a really cool exercise, perhaps, for you and your students, should you choose this piece, to listen to the entire score with the narration. I will say the original book is in French, so I don't know, you might be able to find an English translation performance of that, but just hearing it in context would really enrich the process for you and your student. The regular use of that low bass voice on the downbeat of most measures and the selection of the moderate tempo is possibly characterizing that unhurried walk of a large elephant. Elephants don't really run, they don't move very quickly. And so I love the way that he brings that into the character of the piece. The solo also features a variety of registers and ranges, as you heard. The left hand borrows that standard Chopin accompanimental style, and that the measure typically begins with a low octave single note followed by inverted triads in the higher range. So you can see this on the score below. Just this very first measure here, you can see the low A flat and then inversions of that A flat major chord. There's also larger reaches in the left hand and the right hand. So L'Histoire de Babar continues that student's growth from Les Fleurs Endormies, in which the leaping of the hand was used in some extent in the B section. Now this skill is needed virtually every measure for this piece. So if you choose to use these two pieces in a graduated manner, I think you would find some great connections for your student there. The left hand is very mobile. However, its primary function is accompanimental. So it might be necessary to review balancing techniques such as ghosting, or some people call it the shadow practicing, where you play the low downbeat there and then you simply touch the keys for the chords, but you don't actually press in. So you ghost over the top of the keys. You're not actually creating sound, but you're trying to make sure that you keep that softer balance in the left hand chords where you can hear the beautiful right hand melody. So ghosting or shadow practicing, you may have taught that many times in your studio, I'm sure. The right hand is also required in many places to move across a wide range of notes in a short amount of time. So there's ascending arpeggiated sweeps that are marking the middle and the end points of the piece. Poulenc here is using an inverted A-flat major triad played across 3 octaves, yes, 3 octaves, as a brilliant splash of color before moving into new melodic material. So you can see this on the score at the end of this measure. You have basically this gigantic grace note leading to beats 2 and 3 on measure 14. And then measure 15, you can just see by a quick glance, this looks different in the right hand than anything that has been played so far, anything that I've shown you in the musical example. So we'll get to that in just a moment. The piece ends at measure 28 with a similar arch to the upper registers with another A-flat major triad. However, you'll notice here in the musical example that the composer adds F-flat, G, and C-flat right before that final chord. So one may notice that F-flat, C-flat, and G are functioning as chromatic neighboring tones to that A-flat major triad. So as the final 8th note does release the tension by creating half steps with the return to the A-flat major, perhaps Poulenc's intentions were to give a little chromatic color instead of just ending that expected way. You'll notice that the left hand, that low dotted half note at the beginning, is written as a full measure note. So you would actually hold the pedal even through those chromatic neighbor tones. So it really is part of that complete measure sound. And then that leads me right to modern harmonies and chromaticism. So Poulenc's examples of brilliant chromaticism combine with accented notes. So this is what I was just giving you a preview of earlier. So this is measure 15 and measure 18 in this example. In each bar, there's a dramatic flourish of the right hand descending to, in this case, the bass C flat. Whew. Bass clef is not shown on the screen here, but actually the left hand is playing in the bass clef. So my apologies, that was a mistake on my part. So the left hand is in the bass clef and the right hand is in the bass clef. You notice that the left hand will swoop over the right hand at one point, and so by beat 3 of measure 15, you're in the treble clef left hand. So it's a lot of hand crossing there to think about. So about the chromaticism, though, returning to that topic, these are the only bars in the piece specifically marked forte. They definitely signify a change of mood as well as volume. Perhaps this section is best understood as Babar having a flashback to that traumatic event of his mother's death. Remember, he was just a small elephant calf here, and seeing that, witnessing that had to be traumatic. So when I was thinking about this piece, I thought, you know what? This is so different than anything else that he's doing in the previous sections. I feel like that's really portraying the traumatic event there. So we'll pause and have a quick audio clip there. A beautifully handled sequence of descending chromaticism is also found earlier in the piece at measures 7 through 8. So you're going to see here in the upper right hand, you've got these extremely high ranges, and of the right hand also you see there in that first measure an octave higher above that. So we're looking here at B double flat followed by A flat. So B double flat followed by A flat. So that's a half step. You have at the bar line crossing there, the G to F sharp, another half step. And then moving forward on that last measure, F natural moving to E, a half step. And then E right at the end of the measure, you have E to E flat. So all of this chromaticism there in that right hand, just descending, descending in that right hand part. In conjunction with the previous passage, the left hand has beautiful harmonies in the following measures 9 through 10 that are also propelled by that half-step relationship. So with the hand consistently spanning the minor 7th interval, E flat, D flat, so these are the outer voices of the left hand, the inner voices moving chromatically, G, A flat, and then B double flat there. So you find that outer voices stay the same, the inner voice moving by a half step. Okay, so that gives you just a quick idea, but there's so much chromaticism there. You'll really enjoy sharing those studies with your student. And as you also heard on the recording, complex rhythms are prevalent. So the first example I'm going to share with you is that even from the beginning of this piece, dotted and double dotted tied notes followed by 30-second rhythms appear often and require that the student consistently subdivide. This is not something you want to put at a guess. You definitely want to count carefully. So in example 5-7, which you can see, this sort of intricacy is found in measures 1 through 4. So in beginning at measure 2, each bar presents a quarter beat tied to a double dotted eighth note beginning at beat 2. Every dotted eighth note is followed by 1 or 2 30-second notes. The downbeat of measures 3 through 4 also contain another dotted eighth note followed by a 30-second note. This time there's no ties present, so a little bit of relief there. So the opening measure does contain the previously mentioned tied rhythmic figure as well as additional dotted eighth followed by 30-second notes. However, they are presented in a different order on the first measure, the tied notes being on the downbeat. So I'm showing you all these musical examples on the screen as I'm talking through this. You can kind of visually follow through there. So we will pause if you want to hear an audio clip of this. So it's challenging. It's challenging for students to keep a steady tempo while incorporating these complicated rhythms because they initially seem to go against that basic pulse. But you notice the left hand is providing a steady quarter beat accompaniment that kind of gives us our baseline here to count against. So hearing the left hand's entrances on the beat while that right hand is continuing to hold tied notes is crucial in maintaining a steady tempo. So you probably need to do some work with your student on that in the studio. Complex rhythms, for example, 2, Poulenc does not limit rhythmic difficulties to the dotted and tied notes only. He goes one step farther. So we also find triplets and sextuplets in the space of an eighth note or quarter note. So this is measure 7 through 8. And we were looking at this earlier in terms of chromaticism, but you may have noticed while we're talking about that, the rhythm's a bit complicated. The sextuplet rhythms can be problematic. They are made more difficult here by the addition of the dotted 16th rest. So the students must first identify the location of the 3/4 beats, aided by that left-hand steady accompaniment. Without that foundation, the more complex material will not clearly be understood. So if you look on the screen, I pointed out on top of the right-hand portion, the counting there. So you have the eighth note 1E, and then so you have the end of the sextuplet with the B double flat there playing, and then it goes to the downbeat of 2 with A flat. So you're hearing that rhythm lining up very carefully. So what you want to try especially is once you get that right hand rhythm sorted out against the quarter note in the left hand, is to match the hands together entrances. Both bars have an eighth note at the beginning of each beat. So I'll say at least an eighth note. Of course, the left hand is mostly quarter notes there. So there's a quarter note on beat 3 that matches between both hands. So this helps visual and aural organization. The sextuplet falls on the second half of the first and the third beat. So the eighth note at the beginning of the measure should initially be subdivided into 16ths when you're first starting out, counted as 1E, or however you count it, with the sextuplet following. The dotted 16th rest that begins with the sextuplet equals 1.5 16ths. So one may count that as and As the dotted rest does not complete the final 16th, the 32nd notes at the end of the sextuplet occur at exactly halfway through the 16th's rhythmic value. Aurally, the sextuplets really kind of sound like a grace note figure before the downbeat, as the score requires the student to perform these rhythms either on or immediately after the final 16th of the measure. So I'm just going to conclude this rhythmic studies portion and say it's interesting to notice how the composer focuses a large portion of the right hand movement on the 4th 16th of the beat. The author and pianist Levine advises students to look at the rhythm of the composition as part of the personality of this piece. So as this rhythm is prevalent throughout the work, perhaps it's meant to convey that ungainly lumbering of the tired traveling elephant from our story. The narration that precedes this musical portion in the larger work begins after some days, tired and footsore, he came to a town. All right, so we're going to take a break from that and talk about how can we link this piece to French repertoire. Well, there's layers of textures and voicing melody versus accompaniment in Babar. These are the same skills needed in Debussy's Reverie. And so you can see a little bit of the score here that I excerpted for you. And you see within both hands, we have at least the 2 voices there and measures 9 through 10. And then of course, in measure 19, the right hand is playing these intervals together. These are the stemmed half notes, and then you have the whole note throughout the whole measure, all on the right hand, and the left hand is doing these sweeping gestures with the eighth notes. Okay, so for what students would this piece be appropriate? Suitable for the advanced student, obviously. You may be a student preparing for pre-college, and even a first-year undergraduate. I actually presented this to one of my undergraduate students at the college I teach at, and it was a great introduction. It had some of the more advanced techniques, definitely dove into the modern era, but it wasn't a really lengthy piece. And with the returning A sections, the student feels like, oh yeah, I'm familiar with this passage, and so it kind of gives them a little bit of a sense of grounding. Also, the use of sensitive pedaling and voicing of melody versus accompaniment. Well, you got to have a really well-developed ear and excellent coordination between the hands and the feet. So not every student is going to be able to jump right into this piece. The complicated rhythm needs precise counting, attention to detail, and that means that we're hoping the student has experience with metronome practice and obviously an ability to subdivide. The chromaticism in larger range is exciting and challenging technically, but the piece's short length may be considered a plus. So this concludes the 5 pieces that I am sharing with you today. So first of all, I want to say thank you for staying tuned. I know this was quite a few pieces to share with you, but my sincere hope is that you may be able to take 1 or 2 of them or even all 5 and use them in your studio, again, with one student, or maybe you can pick and choose what fits best for the student needs that you currently have and are working with. So if you're interested, there's a lot of information in my dissertation. And so I didn't cover everything today. We're trying to be aware and cognizant of the time restraints. So if you are interested in getting the entire document, you can go to ProQuest, Proquest, and just search for my name as the author. And you actually can get a downloadable PDF free of charge. So if you're looking for a specific piece that, hey, I really want to work on this with my student, you can get all the information that I did the research about through that PDF. If you do want a hardcover book, there is one available, but I will say it's a little bit pricey, so you might just want to go with that PDF free of charge. And also, if you're trying to get copies of the book, the Bilodeau edition, for example, of these 5 pieces, they're sometimes a little difficult to find, but I actually have seen them on sale at Midwest Sheet Music. So even if they don't have them immediately in stock, I'm sure that they could order them for you, but they're not available through Amazon at this time. So just wanted to kind of give you a few bits of information there at the end. Thank you so much for watching today, and I hope that I have encouraged and inspired you and your students with these 5 French modern pieces.